In the name of God, the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sustainer. Amen. My son was an early walker. He just couldn't wait to get started. He was always 2 steps ahead of the physical milestones in his development, which I found both amusing and also terrifying. It would happen right before my eyes and never when I was ready. I never had the camera out. The first rolls overs, the first wobbles, the first steps were all well before the books told me that this would happen. It wasn't a pretty process. He constantly had these bruises all over him from falling down, and in a couple of cases he had black eyes from crashing into the wall or bumping into a table. I do remember being so amazed at his quick process, how quickly he was learning how to do this, and how it was like putting pieces of a puzzle together, one step at a time. But mostly I remember how beautiful it was to watch him learn something without any shame. Babies are delightful for their innocence, and thankfully, at the ripe age of 8 months, he hadn't learned any of the inner monologue that plagues so many of us, which made this a pure delight to witness. He never felt embarrassed after he would fall or would stumble or would bump into things. It was always just kind of part of the plan, and he just got back up and tried it again. As far as I know, he never compared himself to the other babies out there and wondered, well, where is everyone else measuring up in their process compared to mine? He never said, well, I've been at this for months. I should have mastered it by now. He kind of just went for it. And sure, he fell a lot, but he kept getting back up. He kept going. And then eventually, he was literally running out the front door saying, I want to learn how to ice skate next. If my son was a disciple, I think he would be Peter. Peter also has a go-for-it attitude, or at least to me, it seems like he's never really thinking things through or calculating a move. Impulsive, some would call it, which often means that he can be made fun of from time to time from his reactions to the gospel. He offers to build a dwelling during the transfiguration. He starts walking on water, but then he quickly sinks. He's sometimes snarky with Jesus when he doesn't understand what he's talking about. He cuts off a Roman soldier's ear when Jesus is arrested. His responses are a mixed bag. You never really know what he's going to do, but it usually makes for good sermon material. Of course, perhaps one of his most famous moments in the gospel message is when he denies ever knowing Jesus. And it would be easy to stand here and say, Peter, how could you be so unfaithful? Don't be like Peter. It would be easy to do that, and it's been especially easy for me to do that to the disciples in general these past months. We've been studying in our formation hour the women who followed Jesus and how some of the gospel writers used what the women did to contrast their discipleship and compare that with how the disciples are screwing this up left and right. They can't get it right. And so it's easy for me to point the finger at Peter and say, how could you deny him, Peter? How could you not know? How could you not get it, what he was talking about? Obviously, some people were getting this. How could you leave him at the hour that he needed you most? But I have a feeling that in the grand scheme of things, these denials feel like a pretty big failure moment for Peter. So I don't think anyone needs to pour some salt on that wound. To know that in his worst hours, Peter not only left Jesus' side, but denied that he ever knew him. A colossal failure, if you ask me, for a disciple, and probably if you asked him. But just because it's easy to judge someone in their worst moment doesn't mean it's right. And we all know how terrible it feels to make a mistake and then to have to carry it around like a backpack for the rest of our days. But this isn't where Peter's story ends. Things have gone back to normal after the resurrection. The disciples are out fishing. When the risen Lord appears, he keeps popping up in these peculiar places lately. this time a beach. When Peter sees that it's Jesus on the shore, and true to form, he jumps into the water to swim. He's an all-in kind of guy. So even though we're close to the shore, we're not going to waste time with turning the boat around, docking it, getting off, going to meet him. No. For Peter, we're jumping in, we're swimming, getting to Jesus as fast as he can. And the writer of John puts in a very specific thing into the scene with Peter and Jesus. Jesus is around a charcoal fire. It's a very specific word in Greek, so that makes us think that this is an intentional piece that the writer puts in. This is signaling something. And the only other time that a charcoal fire is used in the gospel is when Peter stood around one to deny Jesus. But this charcoal fire is a new fire. This is a new beginning for Peter. And this exchange with Jesus with some very ordinary symbols to our Christian life, bread, fish, fire, even the water that Peter swims in can represent our baptisms. In this very ordinary moment with the risen Lord, Peter is not only forgiven, but he is given a mission. His source of great shame is transformed into his greatest calling. The resurrection doesn't just mean that we'll be raised with Jesus after our death. The resurrection means that we are free now from our worst moments. We're free from never being allowed to mess up. We're free from shame about all the ways that we've fallen short, about all the ways that we don't measure up. It's not that these things are erased, but they are transformed into something new. The resurrected Christ transforms Thomas, the doubter, into Thomas, the proclaimer. The resurrected Christ transformed Peter, the failure, into Peter, the shepherd. The theme is evident this morning also with Saul. Talk about someone who was clearly not the poster child for holy living in his youth. He's going around breathing threats and murder all over the place. And for some crazy reason, God says, you know what? You know who would be the perfect person to spread my message of love and liberation? Saul. It's crazy. It makes no sense. Unless you believe that God can take all of our mess-ups, all of our failures, all of our colossal disappointments and say, you're just what I'm looking for. As Christians, we're not called because our skills fit the job descriptions. We're called because that we know the risen Lord is something worth living for. I had a mentor once who told me, perfect is a terrible standard. And I try to remember that in my life of faith. The standard of perfection only keeps us small. It makes us think that we have the ability to control everything, but we'll never be able to do that. Perfection lies to us and says that if we could only never do anything wrong, we'll never have to deal with all the pain that comes along with being a human. Peter teaches us that a life of faith is like learning to walk. Sure, we're going to fall down. We're going to get some bumps and bruises, maybe a couple black eyes. We're not going to get this right the first time, or even the second, maybe not even the third or fourth. But it's not about getting it right. It's not about getting it right every time. It's not about being perfect. It's about being all in. To be swimming out to the shore with all of our heart, knowing that the risen Lord is waiting there, and that it's not about whatever we've done or whatever we've not done. It's not about how our mistakes rate on a scale from a 1 to a 10. It's not about how we could have done better in so many areas. It's not about our worst moments. It's about what Jesus has done in the resurrection and the freedom that that gives us to live a new life too. Amen.